Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Tonight is the 20th night of Taraweeh, and we are going to begin a new group of surahs, which is the fifth group. It comprises of 16 surahs, 13 of which are Meccan and 3 of them are Medinan. Tonight we are going to do the first 3 surahs of this group. In this group, like in the previous ones, we will have the subject of warning as well as good news mentioned, and also when verses are going to address believers, they are going to talk about tazkiyah, purification, and spiritual and moral excellence. What we find in this particular group is that, like in the previous group, we saw that the focus was more on affirming the fact that the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, was indeed God's representative. In this particular group, the emphasis is on the other important creed, belief of the Quran, which is unity of God, Tawheed. So all other topics the same, obviously with a different style, different emphasis, but the focus is going to be more on affirming the unity of the Almighty. I mentioned earlier that when we read a surah of the Quran, we would do well to ascertain as to which particular phase of the prophetic mission it belongs to. There are 6 phases. 4 are Meccan phases and 2 are Medinan phases. In this group of surahs, we will find that out of those 6, 4 are being covered. That is general warning in Zari'am, Itmam Hujjah, conclusive evidence, and then Hijrah, Bara and Hijrah, disassociation and migration, and finally after migration, in the Medinan surahs, the 3 surahs, will find that the subject of tathheer and tazkiyah, purification and moral and religious excellence are discussed. So let's start with the first of these 3 surahs. We'll discuss tonight Surah Saba, Fatir and Yasin. Surah Saba and Surah Fatir together form a pair, and like in the case of all other Meccan surahs of this group, we'll find that there is an emphasis on affirming Tawheed, the unity of God, while the subject of warning and good news is also mentioned. The only difference between these 2 surahs is that while in Saba we find that the Almighty is talking about the affirmation of Tawheed, its arguments. In the next surah, we will have it more towards the emphasis on gratefulness, gratitude to be shown to Him. Both surahs begin with Alhamdulillah, which is obviously an indication of the fact that the 2 are forming a pair. Saba achieves its goal through the arguments of history, while Fatir is going to talk about the problem of divinity of angels and clarifying that it's incorrect and it's wrong understanding. So let's look at the first verse of Surah Saba. It says, Alhamdulillahi allazi lahu ma fis samawati wa ma fil ard. All praise and expressions of thankfulness are for the God, allazi lahu ma fis samawati wa ma fil ard, to whom belongs whatever is in the heavens and whatever is in the earth. Walahul hamdu fil akhirah, and for him is going to be praise in the next life as well. Wahuwal Hakimul Khabir, and he is wise and fully informed. We move on to verses 7 and 8, and we find that in these verses the Almighty is mentioning the strong opposition that the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, faced, and the strong tone and words that were used by the enemies against the message that he was delivering. The Quran says, وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, and so said the people who disbelieved, هَلْ نَدُلُّكُمْ عَلَى رَجُلٍ, should we not tell you about a person? The style is of ridiculing, of mocking. هَلْ نَدُلُّكُمْ عَلَى رَجُلٍ, should we not tell you about a person, يُنَبِّئُكُمْ, who tells you, إِذَا مُزِّقْتُمْ كُلَّ مُمَزِّقٍ, when you are going to be disintegrated completely, إِنَّكُمْ لَفِي خَلْقٍ جَدِيدٍ, you are again going to be recreated in a new form, in a new creation. أَفْتَرَى عَلَى اللَّهِ كَذِبًا, has he invented a lie about God? أَمْ بِهِ جِنَّةٌ, or is it that there's some madness in him? بَلِ الَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْآخِرَةِ, no, that's not true. Instead, those people who do not want to believe in the life hereafter, fil azab, they are going to be in punishment, وَالضَّلَالِ الْبَعِيدِ, and they are in this life in extreme misguidance. We move on to verses 10 and 11, which are now a reference to history. The Quran is telling the chiefs of Quraysh in particular that your attitude against our Prophet is primarily because of the fact that you think that you are superior from a worldly point of view. And therefore, this arrogance of yours has caused you not to accept the truth that has come to you. We want to tell you that there have been people far greater than you in worldly stature, power, wealth, and yet they were thankful and open to accept the truth from God. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا دَاوُدَ مِنَّا فَضْلًا, and we certainly gave David from us our bounties, blessings. We said, Ya jibalu awwibi ma'ahu wat-tayr, O mountains, you praise with him our praise, and you birds as well. وَأَلَنَّا لَهُ الْحَدِيدِ, and we made iron malleable for him. That is, we gave him a technology that enabled iron to get easily melted, and then it was employed for various different purposes. أَنِعْمَلْ سَابِغَاتٍ, and make perfect armor coats. وَقَدِّرْ فِي السَّرْدِ, and design the right measure. وَعْمَلُوا صَالِحًا, and practice righteousness. إِنِّي بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرٌ, we watch and see whatever you do. So the Almighty is telling us that on the one hand, He wants us to do as best as we can in our various different worldly professions. He would also like us to be good morally. There's nothing wrong in excelling in worldly matters. In fact, whatever opportunities are available to us in this world to make progress materially, technologically, it's all from God. He gave this possibility to His great prophets like Dawood alayhi salam, David as well. But the important thing is that while we employ the Almighty's blessings to our advantage, we should be thankful to Him as well. Verses 15 to 17 are telling us, لَقَدْ كَانَ لِسَبَإٍ مِّن مَّسْكَنِهِمْ آيَةٌ. Now this is a mention of a nation which got the Almighty's blessings, but unlike in the case of Dawood alayhi salam, they misused those blessings, and therefore they had to pay the penalty for it. There was for the tribe of Saba in their dwelling place a sign. That is a sign for them and a sign for everyone else. Jannatani an yamini wa shimal. There were two fields of garden on the right and on the left. Kulu min rizqi rabbikum washkuru lah. And these gardens, they were as if saying through their existence, their presence, Kulu min rizqi rabbikum, eat, benefit from your Lord's sustenance provisions, washkuru lah, and be grateful to Him. Baldatun tayyiba warabbun ghafur. The land is good and the Lord is forgiving. That is, on the one hand, there is fertile land, and on the other hand is forgiving Lord. So it's a perfect combination that they had. But what happened was that instead, فَعَرَضُوا, they turned away. فَأَرْسَلْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ سَيْلَ الْعَرِمِ, so we sent upon them the flood of the dam. وَبَدَّلْنَاهُمْ بِجَنَّتَيْهِمْ, and we replaced their two fields of gardens with gardens of جَنَّتَيْنِ زَوَاتَيْ أُكُلٍ خَمْتٍ وَأَثْلٍ وَشَيْءٍ مِّن سِدْرٍ قَلِيلٍ. Gardens of bitter fruit, tamarisks, and something of sparse, low trees, cedar trees. That's what happens when people are ungrateful. The Almighty goes on to say, Zalika jazaynahum bima kafaru. This is what we gave them as a result, recompense. This is how we rewarded them. Mahal nujazi illa al-kafur. And would we ever reward anyone like this, except for those who are ungrateful? So, in other words, what the Almighty is saying is that since they were ungrateful, therefore they had to pay the penalty for it. We move on to verse 23, where the Almighty is telling us that when it comes to the next life, God has decided that the accountability process is going to be fair, and therefore there is going to be no shafaat, no intercession, except in accordance with His principles, which are perfectly fair. So He says, وَلَا تَنْفَعُ الشَّفَاعَةُ, and there is going to be no intercession benefiting anybody indahu, before Him, illa liman azina lahu, except for the one for whom He is going to grant permission. That is, God is going to decide as to who is eligible for intercession. And when you look at what the Almighty has mentioned elsewhere, what seems to be the case is that it's going to be only those people who will have performed well, but not well enough to be clear winners, and therefore there would be somewhere on the margin, and the Almighty is going to allow intercession to benefit them. We now move on to Surah Fatir, which is the partner surah of Surah Saba. It's surah number 35, and the surah begins by the mention, Alhamdulillahi Fatir Samawati wal Ard. It's the same beginning as was the beginning of Surah Saba. It says, all praise and all expressions of gratefulness are for the God, Fatir Samawati wal Ard, who is the creator of the heavens and the earth, Ja'ilil Malaika, and is the creator of the angels, Rusulan, who are sent as His messengers. the angels, they bring the Almighty's messages. So they are the ones who are God's messengers. Uli ajnihatin, they are the ones having wings. Mathna wa thulatha wa ruba'. These wings could be either 2 or 3 or 4. Yazidu fil khalqi ma yasha. He increases in creation the way He likes, the way He chooses. Inna Allah ala kulli shayin qadir. Indeed, God has control over everything. So, in this surah, the Almighty is mentioning the fact that these angels whom some of these people were worshipping, they are God's servants, and God has created them for His purposes. And therefore, the description given by God is what they should look at and see, that they have been designed for the purpose of serving God's purposes, and there is no reason why they should be considered divine and therefore worthy of praying to get their works, their tasks done. We move on to verses 5 and 6 of this surah, and the Almighty is saying, Ya ayyuhan nas, O people, inna wa'dallahi haqqun. Be sure that God's promise is absolutely true. That is, the promise that there is going to be another life, the promise that He is going to reward the righteous people and punish those who are evil. Inna wa'dallahi haqqun. Indeed, God's promise is true. Fala taghurrannakumul hayatud dunya. So let not the glamour of this worldly life deceive you. Let not the embellishment, the attraction of this life cause you to forget the next life. وَلَا يَغُرَّنَّكُمْ بِاللَّهِ الْغَرُورِ. And let not that deceiver, Satan, evil, deceive you. إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ. Satan indeed is your enemy. فَاتَّخِذُوهُ عَدُوًّا. And you take him as your enemy. Consider him as your enemy. إِنَّمَا يَدْعُو حِزْبَهُ. He is inviting his group, لِيَكُونُوا مِنْ أَصْحَابِ السَّعِيرِ, so that they too become inhabitants of, companions of the hellfire. So be careful while you are living this life. This life is very short, and beware of Satan and his whispers. Then we move on to verse 10 of Surah Fatir, where the Almighty is saying, Man kana yuridul izza. Whoever seeks honor. There are people obviously would want to have honor in this life, and there's nothing wrong with it, so long as this expectation is within limits. But there are many people who go too far, and therefore what happens is that they go astray. Whoever seeks honor should know, فَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ جَمِيعًا, that all honor is for God. إِلَيْهِ يَسْعَدُ الْكَلِمُ الطَّيِّبُ. Good words rise up to Him. You say something, you believe in something, you have good, noble ideas, they have a tendency to rise and elevate towards Him. However, don't forget, وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحُ يَرْفَعُ. Good deeds exalt them still further. So it's not mere words, hollow words that would count. They do have a tendency, good words, to go up and reach the Almighty's presence. But they are going to go up and be exalted only if they are supported by good deeds. Then we move on to verse 15 of the surah, wherein we find that the Almighty is telling us about a reality we must never forget. Ya ayyuhan nas, O people, antumul fuqara. You are the ones who are in desperate need. Ilallah, and your needs are to be met with by God. He is the one that you should express your needs to. Wallahu huwal ghaniyul hamid. And God is in no need. He is free from all needs and is the one who is being praised. That is, He doesn't need your wealth. He doesn't need your support. You are the ones who are in need of His support and wealth. In Yasha, if He wills, yuzhibkum, He can do away with you, take you away, وَيَأْتِي بِخَلْقٍ جَدِيدٍ, and bring forth a new generation or a new creation. وَمَا ذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ بِعَزِيزٍ, and that is not, most certainly not difficult for Him to achieve. And then He moves on to mention in verse 18, وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى, and no bearer of burden will bear the burden of another person. وَإِن تَدْعُ مُثْقَلَةٌ إِلَى حِمْلِهَا, and if a person whose burden of sin is heavy calls for his burden to be carried, لَا يُحْمَلْ مِنْهُ شَيْءٌ, nothing of it will be carried, وَلَوْ كَانَ ذَا قُرْبَى, even if the one he is asking to carry is a close relative. And the Almighty mentions, إِنَّمَا تُنْزِرُ الَّذِينَ يَخْشَوْنَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَيْبِ وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةِ. O Prophet, you can only effectively remind and warn those people who are prepared to be concerned about the presence of God, even without looking at Him, even without seeing Him. وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةِ, and they are prepared to say their prayers regularly. وَمَنْ تَزَكَّى, and the one who purifies himself, فَإِنَّمَا يَتَزَكَّى لِنَفْسِهِ, he must know clearly that he is purifying himself for his own benefit. وَإِلَى اللَّهِ الْمَصِيرُ, and towards God is going to be the return of all. From here we move on to verse 28, where the Almighty is mentioning about His signs of His grandeur, His creation, His brilliance. He says, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ وَالدَّوَابِ وَالْأَنْعَامِ, and among human beings, other creatures and livestock, مُخْتَلِفٌ أَلْوَانُهُ, they are of diverse colors. كَذَلِكَ, likewise, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ, that is, like all other creations, you find diversity in human beings, in the other creatures that He has made, in the livestock that humans have. So it's a diverse, beautiful world. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ, and the truth is that only those people who have true knowledge are God conscious. They are the ones who properly, truly fear God, because they know God the way He is, knowing what He has done, having proper, true knowledge of His creation as well as what He has revealed. Inna Allaha azizun ghafoor, and be sure that God is mighty, but He's also forgiving. The last verse of this surah is verse 45, and it says, وَلَوْ يُؤَاخِذُ اللَّهُ النَّاسَ بِمَا كَسَبُوا مَا تَرَكَ عَلَى زَهْرِهَا مِنْ دَابَّةٍ, and if God was to punish people immediately for what they do, He would not leave any single creature alive on the surface of earth. However, وَلَكِنْ يُؤَخِّرُهُمْ إِلَىٰ أَجَلٍ مُسَمَّى, He's only sparing them for an appointed time. فَإِذَا جَاءَ أَجَلُهُمْ, but when their time comes, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ بِعِبَادِهِ بَصِيرًا, He certainly gets hold of them. Indeed, He is watchful of His servants. After Surah Fatir, the third surah that we have to do in this session is the famous surah, Surah Yasin. It's the 36th surah of the Quran, and it's one of those surahs, one of the 6 surahs which do not have a partner. This surah begins the phase of Itmam Hujjah, the conclusive evidence that was established against the people who denied, who disbelieved. They have been given the kind of teachings, kind of messages, signs that they do not have any reason to say no. They cannot have any excuse that could be considered convincing. So, on the one hand, it is the climax of the themes of the last 2 surahs. On the other hand, Surah Yasin is a prelude to the next phase of the surahs that are going to follow. So what we find is that in this surah, the warning of the Almighty that has been given to the disbeliever is getting more strong, stern, and they are being informed that if they will not pay heed to what they are expected to do, then they are in for punishment from the Almighty, which is round the corner. So we start with Surah Yasin. Yasin, this is the name of the surah, and it's the disjointed letters, huruf muqattat, which I have mentioned over and over again. They do carry a meaning, but as yet our research has not been enough to unfold or decode the meanings of these letters, except in the case of 1 or 2, and therefore human genius must continue to look for the understanding of what these letters mean. It says, Wal Quranil Hakim. This immensely wise Quran is an evidence. Evidence of what? Innaka laminal mursaleen. That, O Prophet, you are from amongst the messengers. That is, if somebody reads the Quran and is able to see the wisdom that's there in the Quran and its teachings, he or she is going to be convinced that it's from God. And therefore it's an evidence of the fact that the messenger, may God's mercy be on him, his message is from God and his claim is true. Ala siratim mustaqim, and you are on an utterly straight path. That's what these first 4 verses say. And then we move on to verse 7, wherein the Almighty is mentioning clearly, لَقَدْ حَقَّ الْقَوْلُ عَلَىٰ أَكْثَرِهِمْ فَهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. The decision of misguidance and ultimate doom has already come about regarding most of them, so that they won't believe. This statement, this mention is meant for the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, to feel comfortable with. He used to get worried about the disbelievers. They were human beings. They belonged to his nation, to his tribe. Many of them were his close relatives. And therefore, as a compassionate person who was sensitive, he used to worry as to why they are not believing, and would also ask himself this question if he was doing enough or there was something else that could be needed. And the Almighty keeps telling him that you don't have to worry about it. What you're doing is the best one could expect a human being to do to deliver the message. The fault lies with them, and the kind of liberty, freedom that the Almighty allowed to these people for them to choose the right path themselves, that liberty has been misused, and therefore the Almighty has already decided about them that most of them, that they are not going to believe. Now by them, the pronoun here is referring to the leaders of the tribe of Quraysh, and it's a fact that most of them didn't believe. But we know that most of the others believed, they entered the fold of Islam. So, because the address of many of the Meccan verses is directly to the chiefs of Quraysh, it talks about their fate more than anybody else's. We move on to verses 10 and 11. The Almighty comforts the Prophet and tells him, Innama tunziru man ittaba zikra. You can only warn those who follow the message of reminder properly. Wa khashiyar rahman bil ghaib, and they fear God, the merciful God, bil ghaib, without getting the opportunity of seeing Him, staying in the unseen world. فَبَشِّرْهُ بِمَغْفِرَةٍ وَأَجْرٍ كَرِيمٍ. Give the good news to all such people of forgiveness and of noble reward. Inna nahnu nuhyil mauta. Indeed, we are the ones who are going to bring back to life the dead. وَنَكْتُبُ مَا قَدَّمُوا وَآثَارَهُمْ. And we are putting down in writing, making note of whatever they leave behind and whatever they put forward for the next life. وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ أَحْصَيْنَاهُ فِي إِمَامٍ مُبِينٍ. And all things we have enumerated, mentioned in a clear register. Nothing is going to go waste. Nothing is going to be deleted. Then we move on to verses 33 to 35. The Almighty says, وَآيَةٌ لَهُمُ الْأَرْضُ الْمَيْتَةُ. For them is a sign in the dead land. أَحْيَيْنَاهَا. We bring it back to life. وَأَخْرَجْنَا مِنْهَا حَبًّا فَمِنْهُ يَأْكُلُونَ. And bring forth from it grain from which they eat. So it's an amazing sign that while the land is dry, it's as if dead, and then the Almighty, through His immense mercy, because He wants to feed us, makes sure that the land comes back to life after it was dead. وَجَعَلْنَا فِيهَا جَنَّاتٍ مِّن نَخِيلٍ وَعَنَابٍ. And we place therein gardens of palm trees and grapevines. وَفَجَّرْنَا فِيهَا مِنَ الْعُيُونِ. And we caused to burst forth therefrom springs. That's what the Almighty does to make sure that we live on and we get the kind of facilities, resources that we desperately need for our survival. He says, He does it لِيَأْكُلُوا مِنْ ثَمَرِهِ, so that they may eat from His fruit. وَمَا عَمِلَتْهُ أَيْدِيهِمْ. And their hands didn't produce them. They didn't do it. Instead, God did it. أَفَلَا يَشْكُرُونَ. Are they not going to be grateful? Then we move on to verses 41 onwards, when the Almighty says again about another of His signs. You see, the Quran keeps informing us about the kind of blessings the Almighty has conferred upon humanity, for them to live a good life and for them to thank their Creator, their Sustainer. So He says, وَآيَةٌ لَهُمْ. And a sign for them is, أَنَّا حَمَلْنَا ذُرِّيَّتَهُمْ فِي الْفُلْكِ الْمَشْحُونِ. That we carried their forefathers in a laden ship. Noah, Nuh alayhi salam, and his sons, they were there in that ship, and they were all the ones who were the survivors in the entire humanity, which obviously was much, much small in number at that time. But this is the Almighty's blessing that happened to us, to our ancestors. وَخَلَقْنَا لَهُم مِّن مِّثْلِهِ مَا يَرْكَبُونَ. And we created for them from the likes of it that which they ride. On the one hand, He has created boats and ships that float on water, and we are able to travel. And obviously, at the time when the Quran was being revealed, there weren't any aeroplanes. Otherwise, a reference to them would also have been made. But He says that likewise, what He's done is that He has created animals on whose back we ride as well. Obviously, now we can also talk about the different other vehicles that we have, which enable us to travel swiftly from one place to another. وَإِن نَشَاءْ نُغْرِقْهُمْ فَلَا صَرِيخَ لَهُمْ وَلَا هُمْ يُنْقَذُونَ. And if we would have willed, we could drown them, then no one responding to a cry would there be for them, nor would they be saved. This could be said about any of the means of transportation, in particular the aeroplane. Whenever you are there in the sky, it always comes to your mind as to what's going to happen if it just meets with an accident and crashes. Illa rahmatam minna. It's nothing but the mercy from us which keeps you going. Wamatan ilahin. And it's an opportunity of provision provided to you for a certain while. That is, it's not going to last forever. These are all temporary measures the Almighty has adopted to keep us living. Then we move forward to verse 51 onwards. The Almighty tells us, and that's what the real message of the Quran is, وَنُفِخَ فِي الصُّورِ. And then one day the trumpet will be sounded. فَإِذَا هُمْ مِنَ الْأَجْدَاثِ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَنْسِلُونَ. And all of a sudden they'll come out of their graves. قَالُوا يَا وَيْلَنَا مَنْ بَعَثَنَا مِنْ مَرْقَدِنَا. They'll move forward and they'll say, who took us out from our sleeping spaces? هَذَا مَا وَعَدَ الرَّحْمَنُ وَصَدَقَ الْمُرْسَلُونَ. And it would be said to them that this is what the most merciful had promised, and the messengers told the truth. That is, they promised to you that it's going to happen, and here it is happening right before your eyes. In kanat illa sayhatan wahida. It will not be but one blast. فَإِذَا هُمْ جَمِيعٌ لَدَيْنَا مُحْضَرُونَ. And at once they all are going to be brought before us. Then we move on to verse 60, where the Almighty is saying, Alam ahad ilaykum ya bani Adam. Did I not take a pact with you? The Almighty is asking that on the judgment day He'll say to those who would fail that, did I not take a covenant with you? What? Allah ta'budu shaitan, that you're not going to worship Satan. Innahu lakum aduwwum mubin. He is certainly your open enemy. Wa an i'buduni. And I told you that you will worship me alone. Haza siratum mustaqim. This is a straight path. وَلَقَدْ أَضَلَّ مِنْكُمْ جِبِلًّا كَثِيرًا. But unfortunately what has happened is that he misguided and led astray a large number of you. أَفَلَمْ تَكُونُوا تَعْقِلُونَ. Do you not use your reason? Do you not use your senses to be able to stay away from the evil whisperings of Satan and to keep on the right track? Then we move on to verse 70, which says that these people are accusing that the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, God forbid, was a poet, because this Quran is immensely effective and it's not possible unless it's considered poetry. The Almighty says that that's not true. وَمَا عَلَّمْنَاهُ الشَّعْرَ وَمَا يَنْبَغِي لَهُ. He says that we did not teach him poetry, nor is it that it's befitting for him. That is, he cannot be a poet. This is something which a person like him would not do. He has far many more important things to do. And finally, verses 81 to 83, which end the surah, they say, أَوَلَيْسَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ. Can the one who has created the heavens and the earth be qadirin, can he not be capable enough, ala an yakhluqa mithlahum, that he would create once again people, humans like them? Bala, why not? Wa huwa al-khallaqul alim. He is the one who creates and he is the one who is knowledgeable. Innama amruhu iza arada shay'an. His decision of doing something, when it is taken, an yaqula lahu kun, he just has to say be, fayakun, and it begins to happen. فَسُبْحَانَ الَّذِي بِيَدِهِ مَلَكُوتُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. So exalted be the one in whose hands is the dominion of everything. وَإِلَيْهِ تُرْجَعُونَ. And be sure that towards him you are all going to return. May the Almighty enable us to understand his book properly, and may he enable us to follow it as best as is possible.